I'm with Lynette Jennings, and I was just telling her this is all her fault for me being on Art Dealer Diaries, because I ran into Lynette Jennings 25 years ago, maybe.
It's got to be, yeah.
I remember we both looked a little differently.
That's not a fair comment.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, I looked a lot differently. Yeah, because you came and you can't. Well, we're going to just start who we have here. We have Lynette Jennings, and she is a wonderful artist, and that's really what we're excited about to talk to you about today. But she's done a lot of stuff in her life, and it's a very interesting life. And we intersected 25 years ago, and we'll get to that. But Lynette, tell me, tell me a little bit about you. There,
oh my gosh,
how's that an open question?
That's a terrible question.
I'll make it easier for you. Tell me where you grew up.
Springfield, Illinois, corn country girl.
And that's where you went to. That's literally where you were born and raised, and the whole shebang.
Yes, and then I went to school in Chicago, and majored in music, in voice.
Wow.
I was going to be a performing artist.
Like a singer or
a singer,
actor or actress?
Yeah, singer. Broadway I had my heart set on Broadway. But the other angel said, yeah, but you've always loved architecture.
Yes.
So transferred to the University of Michigan, still in music, and then transferred into architecture.
And so what did your folks do in Springfield? Were they
My dad was a bricklayer, eventually had his own business as a contractor.
Did you ever lay bricks yourself?
Yes,
yeah,
I did.
That's hard, isn't it? It's incredibly hard. I did that one time.
It's terribly hard. I grew up, my dad and I were really close, and I was always interested in what he was doing in building and construction. And
that's the architecture, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And on Saturdays, we used to go to the job site, and my job was to pick up brick bats.
What is a brick bat?
Chipped bricks, extras, stuff that's just sitting around on the ground. Put it in a bucket and clean up.
So you're the cleanup girl.
I was the cleanup girl.
And so he did that. And did he? Did he get his business while you were still living at home, or was he?
Yeah, he did. And I think what sort of turned the corner for me was that there were a number of Frank Lloyd Wright houses in Wright's early career in the Springfield area. And he was particularly talented in doing stonework and restoration work, which in those days was a very early art form. I mean, there weren't a lot of people around doing that sort of thing. A renovation idea didn't exist.
Right.
And so we used to talk about how difficult it was for him to match the mortar and color, and I think that really piqued, very much. I refer back to that. I refer back to those days. Somewhere in my genes, there was this sense of reconstruction and renovation and deconstruction, and I wanted to go into architecture not to build big fancy buildings and cathedrals and high-rises. I really, coming from that kind of a background, I mean, we had no money. There were no art galleries. There were no art museums. I mean, I didn't have any of that in my background, but I discovered it kind of by accident. And I think in some ways, in retrospect, you absorb more when you discover on your own rather than being formally taught.
Yeah, it could be true. I think
later
have a deeper appreciation for it if you discover it on your own.
I think so. I think there's an instinct that develops, and you become really visually acute. And I don't know, for the rest is kind of history. I mean, I did start an architectural firm that was very different. Always been a rebel.
Yeah.
Had to do something different. Was not going to conform to the into the norms.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of women architectural
there
firms.
Certainly weren't in those days.
Yeah.
So I had to pay my dues, and there are a lot of stories about how I was treated on the job site, and we won't go into that because that's a whole other political agenda right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an issue. It is actually something that I've gone into with a lot of my women artists, because they universally felt discrimination on trying to get their name out there or seen as an artist if they're a woman, and some still do.
That's true. And if you go back to the classics, you'll find that female artists. Well, you weren't even allowed to.
Right.
You go back far enough, and women were not allowed to paint. That wasn't something that women did.
You
did
their
needlework.
Name, like one of my artists, Deborah Copenhaver Fellows, sign it D. Copenhaver, because she would get more traction if they didn't make that assumption that she was
That's
a woman.
right. That's right. And it's interesting that some of the major museums in the country now are starting to feature whole shows of
That's right, they are. And rightly so.
women artists and classical women artists. I mean, they're digging them out of wherever those archives are, or whoever.
So you felt
keeps
that
those.
when, as starting your firm, I know we're going a little ahead of time, but when you started your architectural
Oh,
company,
very much so.
Yeah.
But you work twice as hard, and you still get there.
Yeah.
So there.
And approximately when was that you did that, your architectural firm?
In terms of the
Timing.
70s.
Yeah, because I'm kind of wondering, you grew up in that Vietnam age too,
Yeah.
right? And how did that affect you? Or did it?
I don't think it did. I think I was.
You didn't have any brothers that were...
I did, but he was excused
Yeah.
because he had, or exempt, because he had some medical issues. I had a number of friends, who were in Vietnam. I mean, I was certainly very aware of it. When I was on campus, there were a lot of protests. But I think that it's interesting, coming from Springfield, very small, very conservative family,
Right.
Catholic family.
Midwest.
Very Midwest. Going to the big city in Chicago, that was the big jump from high school to Chicago.
Yeah, it must have
Living,
been huge.
It was huge. On my own was a scary time, and I think it took me a while to really get my legs. And I think, again, that all contributes to being that rebel, is that you learn things the hard way sometimes.
Were you a rebel in high school? Did you kind of stand out for what you wanted to do?
I stood out because I was different, but not because I was necessarily rebellious.
Right. But you were artistic at that point, you
Yeah.
think? And you were doing...
And I was performing a lot.
Singing?
Yeah.
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 So you knew at a fairly early age, would you say that you were going to go into some form of the arts of some type?
Probably some form of the arts, but I just knew I wanted to get out of Springfield and take on the world. And that was, I grew up with a mantra that you can do anything you set your heart to. And if you work hard enough, the sky's the limit. And I really believed that. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I wanted to do something big.
And you wanted to succeed.
And I waned to succeed.
Yeah,
there was no
gonna stop
question
you.
of, nothing was going to stop me when I figured it out.
Right.
So I guess that's a curse and a blessing.
Yeah, it is. Well, you're a driven person. Yeah.
I'm a driven person.
Yeah, I understand. I can relate to that. And so when you were at college, so at first you're a small town girl in a big, big city, and you're in the art, I guess it's the arts department for...
It was in the music department in
music
Chicago.
department.
Yeah, downtown, music department in Chicago, and at DePaul University was downtown.
And is that when you first started kind of noticing art as far as museums? Did you go to the
I
Field
did,
Museum?
because it was right across Michigan Avenue from the Art Institute.
Wow, yeah, that's nice.
Big opener. Yeah. Spent a lot of time at the Art Institute. Didn't know what I was looking at. I did do art in high school, and I won a couple of art contests, but I never took it seriously.
And why do you think that is?
I think I was afraid of it. I think, like a lot of people growing up who don't have art, didn't grow up in that kind of a background in a big city, where it's right next to you, you're afraid of it.
Didn't seem like a viable option even, maybe?
It didn't seem like a viable option, and yet I was always doing art.
Yeah.
I was always making my own. I would take magazines and catalogs that my mother had at the house, and I would cut them up and make paintings out of them. And I look back now, and I actually won citywide art contests. I'd say, well, didn't you enter into the contest? So why? I enjoyed doing it. It was fun. I was home one day with the flu, and I made this painting of the Last Supper it was totally abstract, with cut out pieces of magazines and glued them down. And my dad was in the garage at the time. He was home, and he sandblasted a frame.
Oh, my God.
A piece of oak, and put it around. And the thing was probably 40 inches by, I don't know, maybe it was longer than that. And it was entered into an adult all-city art contest, and I won 3 prizes.
Wow.
In all 3 categories.
Should we put that on your bio?
I have no idea where that is now. It's probably long gone. But
I may just put it up on your bio as a joke.
Well, don't do that. It was interesting that when I went to college and I was in the architectural program,
So at some point you switched over from
Yes.
music to architecture. And when was that? Do you remember?
I was at DePaul for 2 years,
Yeah.
and then I went to University of Michigan because I was in love.
Yeah.
Oh, one of those. The mistakes we made.
Yeah.
Went to the University of Michigan, was enrolled in the music program there. Disenchanted. And then thought, I've always wanted to be an architect. I mean, that Frank Lloyd Wright influence was really strong still in the background. And there weren't a lot of women. I mean, there were, no women in architecture or in construction at the time.
Yeah,
and I thought,
true.
that didn't bother me.
Yeah.
I can do that. I can do anything. And did well in architecture there. So,
Did you talk to your dad about that when you were doing it?
oh yeah, and he was really proud of me and all that.
Excellent.
But I used to pass on the way to the engineering school. Of course, in those days you had to take a lot of engineering with your architecture. I would pass the art department, and I was always, sticking my head in the door and being very, naive and shy and scared and. Always wondered if maybe I shouldn't have been there, but I was terrified of it. I no more had the courage. I had the courage to become an architect, but not the courage to become a fine artist or a painter.
And do you think it's because you had seen buildings, you'd worked with your dad and those kind of things?
Probably. I was comfortable around the industry.
Right, versus you'd never been to an art gallery before, you left college, or to college, yeah. I mean, I could see that.
Yeah.
I see
it was a world apart.
Lots of people come into my gallery and they'll say things like, I don't know anything about art, I feel very uncomfortable because they've never had any experience. And I could see if you're trying to go into it maybe as even a profession at that time, it would be extremely daunting.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you're exposed to it, you really don't know what that's about as a life.
So you knew at that time in college there was something there, but you set your mind on
and I was
architecture.
doing it. I was actually painting and sketching and doing those things. And of course, when you study architecture, at least in those days, you had to render your own work. And now, as a professional architect, you hire an artist to render your work, right, for presentation purposes. Right. But in those days, you had to develop those skills. And so...
So you were working that muscle.
Oh, yeah. Very much so. Yeah. Privately and in my education. And then after that, I moved to Canada, moved to Toronto, and started an architectural firm with a partner.
And why Toronto? Why'd you do that?
Again, I was in love.
Yeah, okay. I figured. I didn't want to make the assumption, but it seems that could have been one.
I married the kid's father there in Toronto. And this partner and I started this architectural firm, which was very different. At the time, of course, it had to be different. I had to do something that was outside the norm. The idea was we were working with developers because those were the years of the massive development both in the U.S. and Canada.
And was
land
this
development
like
and
mid-70s?
This was mid-70s to the 80s, through the 80s. And we started this firm, and it did extremely well, very fast. And so I really rose quickly.
Was that because of your vision and what you did, or just because of you guys? Or both?
Both. I think we had an attitude towards marketing that was really unique because in those days we were building houses, and when you build houses, we came on with an architectural firm called Markitecture, which we really weren't allowed to do according to the Architectural Institute. But it was about creating a whole package for a developer, because in those days they were building houses that their wives wanted 50 times over because they had 50 lots. And we were saying, wait a minute, you need to build houses according to how people live in this area, who you're trying to attract as homeowners, and what the homeowner really wants. And it was interesting because all of that growing up in Springfield, being very grounded, very close to the earth, with a father who built for other people, it gave me a sense of, wait a minute, this is how you really live. This is, right. And there was a certain practical approach to our work that had this little kiss of, I wouldn't say glamour, but elegance to it. And that really described the style, a woman's approach.
Yeah, which is probably unique as well, right?
Right, and it took off. took off like crazy, which got me a lot of attention, which took me into the press. So I had my own radio show, live radio talk show.
And did they come to you to say, why don't you do this? And
Yeah.
And you just immediately said, sure.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
What can go wrong?
Right.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I had a live radio show where it was 2 hours long every Saturday morning, and people who would buy all these new houses that developers were building all over the place and giving them vanilla
Right.
would say, well, how do I do this? Because at the time, the only thing that was out there was Architectural Digest and Better Homes and Gardens. They were all very elegant, high-end magazines, and they didn't relate to the mass market,
Normal person. Really.
to the normal person. Yeah. And really, that was the beginning of how I built eventually the show, because it went from there to writing for newspapers to writing for the magazines. I became a magazine editor for Canadian Living Magazine for 19 years.
Wow.
And developed their section.
Did you know you had writing skills?
I always wrote. But at the beginning of the magazine, they provided the 5 founding editors with writing courses for the media, which was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing that, and then really that became my passion, was really to bring architecture, design, and art to the masses.
Had you started to form a vision of what your brand was? 'Cause
Yeah.
At that point, yeah. And how old were you? Approximately.
I was in my 30s,
Yeah, so you're young.
late 20s,
Yeah,
early
really,
30s.
really young.
Yeah,
So
really
you're,
young.
So you're building all these homes. You have your own architecture firm. You have your own radio show, and you're writing for the national magazines about
I was the editor for the section about homes.
homes.
And it took off. I mean, everything just was taking off like crazy. But, you know, it was being at the right place at the right time. I mean, there was enormous need for someone to really break down the barriers. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And I was still doing my art. I mean, I was still doing art at home.
For yourself?
For myself.
And what kind of art were you doing at that time?
A lot of pencil work, a lot of magic marker work. I wasn't doing oil painting, but just anything I could get my hands on. It was really my relief.
And at any point at this time, had you thought I should start making art for?
No.
Yeah, it was just strictly for you.
It was strictly for me.
Yeah,
I mean, anything I could do that was three-dimensional. Didn't do as much painting as I did more three-dimensional things, anything, sculpture, collage, assemblage. You know, it was just sort of in the back of my mind all the time. But then the television show, I just thought one day, I happened to be watching television. I was working on a project, big development project in Simi Valley, California. I was living in Malibu.
Nice. Which is burning today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And saw Bob Vila.
Yeah, I know who that is.
You know, and he was teaching people for PBS. He was working with PBS, teaching people how to build a deck.
Yeah, it was
And
the
I said,
old, what's it called, the
I
Your
don't remember.
Home or something
This
on
Old
PBS.
House, I
Yeah,
think,
This Old
something
House.
like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, why isn't somebody telling people how to take it from there? I mean, you got a house, you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to decorate it. You don't know how to do design. You don't know, you're terrified of it.
Right.
And you're kind of just throwing everything at the wall. And I thought, you know, I could do that.
Of course you can.
And in those days, you put a one sheet together, and I walked it into CBC in Canada. And they said, "Are you kidding? We're not going to do a show on design. That's like watching paint dry."
Yeah.
And they said no.
Yeah.
And the second time they said no. And then the third time they said, well, okay, but we're not going to pay you for it. So if you can raise the money to make your own show, we'll let you put it on the air, but we'll put it on at drive time. It was the worst possible time slot because they had trouble filling that slot. So I was basically a spot filler.
And this would be for TV.
Yeah, and this is a half-hour show.
Okay.
And I thought, it'll be good promotion for the architectural firm.
Right.
I'll do it for a couple of years, and what the heck,
Yeah.
right?
All I got to do is come up with some money to get it on.
Right. And so I went back to all the suppliers and the vendors who I specified in all those houses. Like the window companies and the brick companies and the siding
you saw
companies.
It already. You knew you could get the money.
Yeah. And I just said, okay, guys, payback. You know, it's time. And they did. And I was able to produce the show and put it on the air. And
So you produced it, wrote it, directed it.
performed it
and
ad lib.
performed it. ad lib. Oh my God.
Because I hate scripts.
For 30 minutes. And how often was this? How many
It was,
episodes?
at that point, it was 26 episodes.
That's a lot.
So it is. And then I took one of those episodes and sent it down. Discovery had just started. John Hendricks had just put together the cable channel Discovery. He had Julia Childs and Sharks. And he was looking. And I sent it down to him. And the first time they said no. Mm-hmm. Second time they said no. Third time they said, we're not going to pay you, but here it is.
Now, what's the time frame when you do that? I mean, you do it 3
times. It was a year.
So did you just say, okay, I'm going to send it every 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, basically.
Until
just
they
beat down the. I learned that somewhere along the line. I learned that you just got to keep
knocking on the door.
Don't take no for an answer.
Yes.
And yeah, and then finally he said, well, yeah, okay. And within a year, I was the lead-in for Oprah, who had just started.
Oh my gosh.
And the thing took off like a rocket ship.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what hit me. I mean, at that point, I was not anticipating that. It forced me to give up the architecture firm.
I was going to say,
because it was.
You're still running an architectural firm.
Yeah,
A very successful one.
I did keep the magazine gig for quite a while because there was a good overlap. It was all media, right? I mean, There was great overlap between the television and the magazines and print. And then eventually and then I moved the production company. It was my production company, and moved it to the States because there weren't enough sunny days to shoot the amount of material that I needed in Canada.
Yeah.
So I had to go where there was sunshine.
So how hard was that to make that decision? You have a very successful firm, and a reputation, and you're doing well and probably making good money. To go, okay, I'm going to do this for Discovery, which at first I'm sure didn't pay a ton of money, but at some point it did. How did you decide?
It never did. I mean, that's a misnomer that you make a lot of money on. The money that's made on television then was not anything to write home about, because they didn't have product placement then. And they didn't have the big branding issues now that where you become a spokesperson for any particular brand. Mm-hmm. It had just started. The whole marketing industry did not get it. They didn't. That was the very beginning of it. So, in fact, if anything, it was not a good idea to become a spokesperson for a brand. And in fact, I resisted that. I had such a loyal following so fast through the writing that I never wanted to feel like, I didn't want my constituents to feel that I was paid to say something. If I recommended something, or I recommended an approach or a concept or a process, it was because I discovered it or I felt really good about it and I felt good about you doing it, but I wasn't going to push you into a brand name or into a product. And so I resisted that. Eventually, that cost me.
And why do you say that?
Well, because that's where the money is.
Yeah, okay, it cost you in that respect.
Yeah.
But did it gain you in other respects? Because,
I kept my integrity.
Exactly.
And that was more important to me.
People realize that watched it.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. I never made the big bucks like they do on Home and Garden Television now. But I was comfortable.
How did you make that decision, though, to make that switch? Because that's a really big switch to go
from what?
From architecture to go, I'm going to take this job and do this with the Discovery and do it. I mean, because you had to give it up. Or was it? Maybe you just went with your gut.
No, because I think under all of that, I was really a teacher.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah. I really wanted to teach. I wanted people to...
I see that, by the way.
Yeah, because you can't... In my private practice in architecture, I found that there was a tremendous need, and for some reason I just felt like I needed to fill it based on my own experience and my own background. And if I can help you, then that was really what I really loved to do, was to help and to reach out to people.
That was you saw that as your role in life. Yeah.
I think more so. And I think that's part of what, there's something of that that's in my art. That's, to make the segue into why I paint and what I'm doing now and why I'm painting what I'm painting, is there's a bit of that. Mm. 'Cause, 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 I want people to experience what I experience in nature and with the rocks and with this particular
Your vision. Yeah. I mean, I think all artists have that to some extent, real artists, that they are showing you what they experienced in that moment in time and hope that you feel some kind of emotion that connects the two of you.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, it's visceral.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
And
just like when I was looking at your painting earlier, I mean, there's something there that moves me. I can't put a pin on it and say why it is, but there's something that for me, I think it's just the movement of the painting. I see such emotion coming through those brushstrokes and the way the paint's laid down.
And the way I paint is really a little unusual because no one has taught me how to paint that way. Once I retired in 2000 from television.
And we'll get to that because I'd like to know why you retired to get to this next level. Because that's a transition, that's another major transition. Because you did the Discovery Channel for 18 years. You had that.
That show was on the air for 18 years.
And it was highly rated.
It was highly rated. It was top rated. And it was at the 26, what happens in television is when you are successful, they want more. I mean, it's an animal.
Yeah.
It will gobble you up.
Yeah.
And just about did.
Because they're pushing you so hard?
Well, they're responding to the need. I mean, they're responding to audience demand. And before long, very before long, I did 3 years of 26 hours. And then they wanted 50 minutes or 60-minute shows, not half hours. They wanted full hours, and they wanted 50 a year.
Oh, my God. And you're still directing, writing, the whole shebang?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's incredible.
And so I had a staff, an enormous staff. I hired a movie crew. Because we were shooting film. Wow. Wasn't like it is now.
Yeah, no.
We had a big truck, a big studio,
yeah,
live audiences.
I remember when you came. That's how we met. Just to point out how we met, is 25 years ago. You called me or something. I think it actually might have been you, in fact, that called and said, I want to do a show on baskets. I have no idea how you got my name, but somehow you found me as a basket expert in Tucson. Probably because you're just going to Tucson. And but it was very professionally done. I remember thinking, wow, this is very professionally done. There was people that came beforehand. They scoped it out. They got everything right. And you came in and are exactly like you are now, which is true. I mean, even at that point, you're a pretty big star, at least in a lot of people's minds. For that field, you were the leader, no doubt. But I didn't find you to be anything but what you are now. And so somehow you kept that, because at that point, that sense of who you are, at that point, you've probably been doing it for quite a while.
Yeah, but I think if you love what you do, you don't get caught up in the stardom that television and that industry can put you into. I mean, there were opportunities to do that. My marriage had gone well before that all happened, and I had 2 little girls. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, that keeps you pretty grounded when you're a parent. A single parent trying to hold it all together. 50 shows, 60 minutes with 2 kids, and being on the road all the time. And being on the road.
I mean, there everywhere, right?
Yeah, but there was, I had to juggle that. Yeah. And it wasn't important to me to become a star. That was a byproduct. Because it was all happening so fast that I didn't have time to really ingest all that. And yes, I had an agent with William Morris in New York, and I was going back and forth to New York and doing all that sort of thing that you do with agents and PR companies and all of that. And did they want me to rock the red carpet? Yes, they did. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. Why don't you move to New York and be right here in the heat of it, and that way we can get you all this publicity all the time, and you're in the hunt,
right?
Basically,
right.
You want to be in the magazines, you want to be in People magazine, you want to be in the tabloids and all. I said, no, I don't.
Right.
I'm doing this because I want to teach. I'm doing this because I can deliver, a lot of advice, and this is the format. But I don't want any of that.
And you were doing it for your audience.
And I was doing it for my audience. Yeah. And it was hard enough to keep up with the production, let alone doing all the other stuff too.
Yeah.
So I guess I never really bought into all that. I'm really, because I figured that this was going to fizzle anyway. I never thought it would become what it did. And every year, every 2 years, your contract is renewed, and the ratings are higher, and they want more, and you say, okay, how many more cities can we shoot, and how many more houses, and how much more can I teach? And haven't I said it all already?
Right.
And you learn that that's not the way television works, that you just keep producing. And frankly, what really saved my emotional bacon in this is not so much teaching architecture and teaching through the houses and visiting all these wonderful houses. And there were some amazing architects and designers that I, profiled.
Yeah.
But it was the artists. And when I finally... the artists weren't part of the show in the beginning, but there was a point where I decided I really want the art on the show. All the artists that I run into or that I meet and I see in galleries, and at this point, every city that we went to, we would live there for a week. There were downtimes. There were times where I just needed to get away from the camera and the editing and looking at film at night.
Right.
I would go to the galleries. And I would go to the museums. And I started to realize there were so many crafts people in this country who were never profiled, never saw the light of day. Incredible talent. Why can't I do that as part of the show? So I went to Discovery and said, okay, it's my show, it's my deal.
Right.
You don't own it.
Right.
This is what I want to do. I want a quarter of the show, a quarter of the hour to profile art. Whoa.
I can only imagine.
Are you kidding me?
They thought, oh my God.
How could you, this is like, what are you going to do? How many times can you see a woodworker, carve a piece? I said, you know what? It's not about how he does it. It's about why he does it.
Which is the show, too.
Which is that turned the corner. Because at that point, I decided, okay, I don't know how many more years I'm going to be doing this. But the real love is profiling the art and being with the artist, because it would take a day. Yeah. So I would spend a day out of that week I would spend it in that artist's studio playing with them in all these every medium that you could possibly imagine. And that was my most favorite part of the day. I mean, I couldn't tell you how much I would look forward to that particular part of every day.
Did you see yourself as, okay, these are really my
I was itching
Yeah.
to get my hands into whatever. If it was glass, it was clay, it was whatever. I couldn't wait to get my hands into it. And I thought, okay, one day I'm going to retire. And that's not too far away because I was getting pretty burnt. And just decided, okay, that's what I'm doing.
Was there an epiphany, a moment where you go, I should be on the other side, I should be this artist person, I should be making and creating the art instead of what I'm creating here? Did you go, that's it?
Actually, it was 9/11.
Yeah, that can be a big epiphany.
I was in Europe. We decided to take the show to Europe. And we had just left Italy and was moving into France, just crossing the border. And the translator that I had in the car with me got pretty excited because I had the news on, of course, in Italian at the time. And that's when the first plane went into the building. And it was interesting because we were stuck there for a while. Of course, planes weren't flying. I couldn't get the crew out. We had to continue. We had a lot of problems going into France because they were not friendly. Somehow at those, very early hours, there was a lot of finger pointing because nobody really understood what was going on. And we were the Discovery crew, moving our trucks into south of France because we were shooting. We were going to go right up through, the famous roads up through the south of France and catch all of that kind of art. And we were profiling artists there that had come from generation upon generation of skills. And those were really the stories that I was trying to bring. And being connected to the people who were deeply, I don't know what the word is, so deeply involved in art to their soul, so many generations back. It was in their genes. It was in their fingers. I mean, it's
organic for them.
It was totally organic. And to be with them, not even speaking the language, which it was even more profound because that's what art does. It transcends all languages. Yeah. and all cultures. And that, and having a lot of downtime in the hotel because we could only work, we were really limited.
Mm-hmm.
I picked up the phone at one point when I finally could get through, called Discovery and said, get us out of here, do what you can, because at that point I wasn't getting anywhere with the airlines. And we were kind of stuck, and they said, look, we got crews all over the world, we can't help you. And so we were there for a while, which was really scary because within 3 weeks, my daughter was getting married. And I needed to be here for the wedding, to run the wedding.
Yeah, you could already see that coming, right? Yeah, I'm not getting home. What's going on?
What am I going to do? She said, swim. But there was a lot of sort of, that was really I decided then, okay,
you had
I'm
some
done.
downtime to think about it? You think that was part
to really
of it?
think about it, to absorb it. And, you know, everybody was looking at their lives at that point.
No,
I mean,
it's true.
we all.
I remember.
I mean, there were profound moments, I think, in everybody's lives.
Yes, I agree
And
with that.
I guess I was just burnt enough and done enough and had been doing it. We were done.
Yeah.
I was done.
And that was almost 18 years.
You know, to do Europe was sort of the last thing I wanted to do anyway, was to make sure that eventually I got to Europe with the show.
Yes.
And I decided then what I really wanted to do was build a ranch in Colorado that was an art ranch. That was where I was going to retire. And I did. I came back, got on the road, found a piece of land. Within a year, broke ground, and that was when? That was 2001, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you I don't know when you broke ground, maybe 2002.
2002, and moved in 2003.
And what was the concept of
it.
that with the art ranch?
It was interesting that I had profiled so many artists all over the U.S., everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
And became known for it. And so artists were watching the show to watch other artists.
Yeah.
And so they started communicating with me. Like, you know, I stayed in communication with many of them for a long time. And they said, God, you know, could you introduce me to so-and-so? I would love to collaborate with them. And so I'd have somebody like, a glass artist in the Northwest wanting to work with a ceramic artist in Florida.
Yeah.
You know, and could you make the connection?
And there was no internet, really. I mean, there was, but there wasn't.
There was,
the
but
social,
not like that.
Not the
And
social media
no,
kind of thing.
And it was rare. The interesting thing is that artists can get together and collaborate at places like Anderson Ranch and Penland and places, these big art communities or art centers. But when they're there, they have the responsibility to teach. And so they really don't have time to work on their own work and create and work with someone else. And so it's rare that they have an opportunity to do that. And I thought, what if I built a ranch? I always wanted a ranch. It was what I wanted anyway, because I loved the Southwest. And what if I made it a place where artists could come and just work together? I'll provide the studios and the cabins, and they can just work together, and I can just be a fly on the wall and watch it all.
Yeah, there it is. It's coming back to that. I want to be an artist, and I want to see how that's done. And I understand you.
Desperate to get in.
Isn't that
to do it?
Yeah.
And I did.
Isn't that interesting? And so how did that go? What was the response?
Went really well for about 6 years, and then we got into that mini recession.
Yes.
And the money dried up. You had to help fund it.
Yeah. And how many artists would you have come to your ranch?
We had several conferences where we had, one in particular was 11 artists from all over Europe. We flew in who had never worked together before with some American artists, and they were there for 12 days and made art. We developed a program for cancer survivors.
I remember you saying something about that a long time ago.
And it was a program developed for people who, it wasn't art therapy while you were going through treatment, but it was for people who are sort of stuck in victimhood afterwards.
A way to get out.
A way to get out of being a victim and moving ahead. There's a point where you come out of cancer and need to find a way to move forward.
Yeah, because it's a daunting thing.
Right.
when you have your life potentially taken away or, a limited time, I think you probably look at things differently.
Well, there's another part of that transition.
Yes. Tell us about that.
And that is that when I built the ranch, I came back from 9/11, called Discovery and said, I'm done. Run reruns, do whatever you have to do. I'm finished with this.
Did they try to keep you or?
Yeah, but, they wanted new terms and more shows and everything, and I just knew that I didn't have it in me. I was tired.
Yeah, you were done.
I was tired. And so I put the concept for the ranch together, and I knew that part of it was going to be for this cancer situation because I had a lot of people write to me who were going through cancer watching the show and somehow felt empowered by this show, which blew me away.
Sure.
When I started getting that kind of, we had a lot of fan mail. I had a department for a fan mail, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
But, I could only read so much of it. But I would always read people's mail who were either children or elderly or infirm, sick for some reason. And this whole business of these cancer survivors or people in cancer treatment watching the show, I couldn't figure that out. And finally, I nailed a couple of cancer nurses and people at oncology centers and said, what's the deal with this? Why this show? And they said it's just empowering. It's just, it gives them a way of focusing on their lives again, starting with their home.
Yeah, the basis of
right.
where they are.
That's
where
your core.
Where they're pretty much stuck if you're really sick.
Right. And when they're in the infusion centers in those chairs and you're stuck there for 8 hours a day, they watch television. And then they go home and watch television when they're recovering from their infusions. Yeah. And it all made sense. And I thought, why don't we put a program together for cancer survivors? Well, I put that together and I enlisted some people, some doctors, to help me out with putting that kind of a program together at the same time as I was, building all the facilities. And then I went for my mammogram. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah. And now you're one of those people.
And now I'm one of those people. And I decided that going through treatment, I was going to learn as much as I could about and really document what this felt like.
Right.
And we did. We made a lot of changes to the program. And then I came out of it and said, and I enlisted my oncologist and I said, you're gonna let me survive. I mean, I don't care what you have to do to make me live, but I just built this ranch, I'll be darned if I'm going to let this go south. And so she did, and I'm here, and that was 17 years ago. And so, what can I tell you? But we did, and we did it successfully, and it was really quite an experience.
And now at some point, so you've done all these different, you've been a singer, you have been an architect, you have been a radio show host, a writer, your own production company, director, producer, star. Now you have an art studio for artists to collaborate and for cancer survivors. The recession hits of 2008. That goes down, which for a lot of people. And then at some point, Lynette Jennings goes, I actually need to do what I probably should have been doing since I was a little kid, which is become an artist.
Well, it happened while I was in cancer treatment. Is I thought, maybe you should practice what you preach. And I went to a local art center and I started ceramics. Because I really needed something to punch. You go through a lot of emotions when you're in cancer.
Right, sure.
And I started ceramics just because it was physical. I just needed that physicality. And then I also, there was a painter there who did natural sort of nature art, but very talented and very loose with his. And of course, I'd seen so much and seen so much art. And
you'd educated your eye for 20 years.
Oh my gosh! I mean, I'd challenge anyone to see as much art as I saw.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's true.
All over the country, and so I really felt I didn't need to see more art. What I needed to do was do art.
Right.
And so I took a course from him in oils because I'm a bit of a purist. Didn't like all the what you do with acrylics these days, piling all these different chemicals and things together. I thought, I just stick with oil and see what I can do. And I love the abstraction. And so I started to paint, and he was teaching people to paint with a brush, and I hauled out a palette knife. And I couldn't put enough paint on that canvas fast enough or hard enough or thick enough. And he liked what I was doing, and I was making the art that, you know, he had a picture up there that he wanted us all to do, and I was doing it. But he said, "You don't need me. You just need to go out and paint, lady." He was really fun. Dan Leger, I'll never forget him. And he basically threw me out of the class because I was doing something, again, being a rebel. I had to do something different. And I did. I just started painting. And, you know, that's what they tell you is really...
it's a muscle.
It's a muscle. You really just need to practice. Yeah. Practice. And so I did, and then I found my own technique, which is a bit challenging because I paint wet on wet. Yes. You can't stop painting. I have to finish a painting, which is pretty intense.
Yes.
But I like it that way.
Yeah, of course you do.
You know me well enough now to know.
And everyone else does.
You can see my paintings. You can see my paintings and go, "Oh yeah, I know where she was that day." What her headspace was.
Yeah, but that's what it's about. I mean, it's the emotion coming through. If art doesn't provide any kind of emotion, I don't care if it's anger or happiness, it should provide something where you feel. And, you know, your paintings definitely do that. There's no doubt about that.
And it's hard to let go. I mean, you really, I have a terrible habit of editing in my head. And that comes from being a producer.
Sure, of course.
You know, you're constantly double-checking, self-checking. What can go wrong next?
Yep.
How can I get ahead of the curve? And it's really hard to drop that. I don't draw anymore because I get very rigid. And there's the reason I use a palette knife, and that is because it's more emotional. I no longer pile too much paint on, but it keeps me loose. It keeps me from being very specific. And I don't paint real places because I hike a lot. I love the rocks. I love the tactility of the rocks. You rarely see sky in my paintings. What you see is really my reaction to geology and
to
time
bricks,
and
to organicness.
The architecture comes through because I use the edge of my knife a lot.
It does, for sure.
Yeah, because I love the architecture of a mountain.
Yes.
But I also, living in the Southwest, spent a lot of time near the Four Corners, and part of my love of the Southwest is the Native American culture. And I started to really make a study of their creation myths and their culture being the closeness to the earth, the closest to nature, how incredibly ingrained in their whole belief system.
Yeah, they come from the third world to the fourth world.
And
emergence right there.
It's the emergence, and it's their connection with those rocks means something. They're sacred places everywhere. And I really feel that I spent a lot of time in my cancer treatment was on the ranch, which had a mile-long driveway, which I was there by myself, really, and no one had ever been on that land after the Native Americans. I had raw native land.
Yeah, untouched.
Yeah. And I swear that I was able to heal because of what was in that land and whoever was on that land before.
Yeah. You felt
to this day, I felt it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because other people who would come to visit me, people who had never been there, didn't know me, didn't know my background, just came, either they were cancer survivors or they were artists, would always come after about the third day and say, you know, there's something about this land here, about this ranch. And it was palpable.
I think a lot of artists feel that way.
Yeah.
I think Maynard Dixon felt that way.
There's, you know, if you are open, there's something there. And I'm not into the vortexes of Sedona. That's a whole different, situation. But I just felt that it was the, I don't want to say infinity because you use that word when you talk about the universe itself. But there is something about the land before time is the kind of way I look at it. It has seen us. It has seen civilization
Yeah, we're a microsecond of
We are a
what it is.
microsecond, and if you can connect to that depth of what the earth really represents and its influence on all cultures in various ways, there's something that you feel, and that comes out when I paint. And I'm so immersed, and because I have to paint continuously. It's not something I can walk away with and go watch the news.
Right. Yeah, you're tapping into
or go
something
make a cup of
from
coffee.
Your gut.
Like,
and
I have to
letting it come out.
Yeah, it's coming out in a really deep way. I'm exhausted after I do a painting,
I believe that.
and sometimes I don't eat because I just keep painting right through lunch and right through dinner. And Jim has to come in and say, "Hey, give it a break." No, I can't. It's that one stroke. It's one more stroke. But what I'm painting is, what I think I'm painting, I come back the next day, and it doesn't look like what I painted.
It feels differently, or it looks differently.
Looks differently. Because I'm not actually painting a real place. Right. I'm painting an impression of something I remembered seeing or hiked through or watched
you're painting your
or
emotions
drove by.
Is what you are at that moment in time.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, and if this looks like a place that you've been, wonderful.
Yeah, and maybe.
And it might be, but it isn't a place, it didn't come from a photograph.
Yeah, a lot of artists that I have do that. It's just in their mind.
Yeah.
Howard Post is a good example. A lot of his, people always go, oh, that's this and that, and he shakes his head yes, but it's something he sees in his own brain for the most part.
Yeah,
and those are probably the most powerful paintings to some extent.
I think they are, and some of it is accidental. I have to say, when you're painting with a palette knife, you don't have ultimate control. Yeah. I mean, you can, but I don't. And I double load or triple load 3 colors on the knife at once. And as you put that stroke down, it will change on you. And which gets tricky because what comes off that palette knife may not be the tonality of the color that you wanted, so now you've got light issues, where the light went dark instead of light, and now all of a sudden the sun is shining on that stroke, and it shouldn't have been, but maybe it should, and then it will lead me down another path, and so it starts to create itself. Somewhere I'm connected to it, but it certainly isn't technical by any stretch.
Yeah.
And what comes out, sometimes the scale is completely different than what I had intended. And you see pathways.
Yeah.
You'll wander, you'll look at the picture, and even I look at the picture and think, oh my gosh, that's a pathway. And where does that pathway go? Well, it goes down through that rock. And then, oh my gosh, I could hike that.
Yeah. So how did you, when you said, okay, now I'm going to paint, and you're painting, what was your next step to try to go, okay, I've got to get it out to the world? Because I remember when you came into my gallery in Santa Fe, I remember vividly, in fact, when you came in and said, I'm painting now, and would you like to show my work? And I remember
I didn't think about how to get it out to the world. I just called you.
Yeah. I remember vividly when you came and asked me, and I thought, oh, God, I really like her. I hope her work's good, because if it isn't, I can't show it.
As a friend, can you tell me if this is worth showing?
Yeah, it's about what you said, and it's fantastic. I knew immediately you could paint. It's like, oh God, she can paint. Yeah, and it was like, that's fantastic.
You were so encouraging, because I really didn't know how it stacked up. I mean,
you don't.
And the art,
I think as an artist or as a writer, you know, sometimes I don't know. You know, people say, oh, it's great, and the other one's like, oh my God.
You don't. You just have to jump in, and I mean, I learned that from all the other things that I did. Is you jump in, and you know, if the stars are aligned, and you do the work. You know, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and if it isn't, you know, I'll go on and do something else.
Well, and I think that statement you said, you do the work, is so critical. That a lot of people, especially younger people, I think, just want it to happen, and they expect it to happen.
Doesn't happen that way. It does not happen that way. All the story I just told you came with brutally hard work. Yeah. Lots of hours, lots of sacrifices. Thank God my children are well established, well founded, got good careers. Right. They're level headed, and they didn't wind up somewhere on the streets. You know, because there were a lot of sacrifices that they made.
Of course.
But if Mom wasn't working and I wasn't doing what I was doing, they weren't going to have those ski weekends either.
Yeah.
So,
And are they creative, by the way?
yes, one is an art director,
Ah,
excellent graphic artist. And the other is a gymnastics coach. And that didn't come from me.
yeah.
And I have 3 grandchildren. One is sort of a football maniac, young, they're all young. And one wants to be a performing artist. And the other, I don't know what she's doing, but she's very creative and very much like her mom.
Yeah. And then you also have a significant other who's quite...
Well, my husband.
he's quite fantastic artist.
Yeah.
You can tell us a little bit about Jim. He'll want to hear his name on this podcast.
Jim is my soulmate.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no way around it. And I actually met him when I was coming out of cancer and was taking those clay classes.
Mm-hmm.
I took a raku class from Jim, who happened to be passing through Colorado at the time.
Jim Robert.
And Jim Romberg.
So his name gets out there, so people know, because
he
I represent
was-
him too, and he's fantastic.
And I was told, and this is a bit of the story, is the person who was teaching me clay knew Jim Romberg. And Jim had quite a history of his own as quite a player in the world of raku, coming from Claremont and the sort of the Soldner age, which was a whole transformative time in clay, in American clay. And he was one of the players. And he was at Sun Valley Center for the Arts for years and was well known for that. And Sun Valley Center for the Arts was a big art center like Penland and like, Anderson Ranch and all of these places. And what I was trying to build at the time was not unlike those places. It was going to have a very different format, but it was going to be significant and it was big, and I needed some advice as to how to put that together. And my clay teacher at the time said, well, Jim Romberg is the guy you need to talk to. And not only that, but he's like the prince of raku. And you really need to not only take his workshop, because it's going to be here then a couple of weekends, but you need to talk to him about your ranch and how
Yes.
to do this. And I thought, ooh, I got a double here. That'll be really cool. And so I did. I took his class. And the rest is history. I not only got the advice and got a good clay class, but I got a husband.
Yeah.
And he joined me at the ranch, and we did all of that together. And he is a working artist and still, just as impassioned as I am
And
about art. And
do you guys have studios that are together in the same area, or how do you guys do that?
yeah, we have separate studios because raku clay is very dirty
Yes.
and dusty.
And you don't want him in your
And
studio.
I need an airlock between the two
Yeah.
studios. No, but he paints as well,
Yeah, I
and
know, he's a very good-
I
he's a
don't
very
dabble
good
in
artist.
clay anymore.
Yeah.
There's only one
Yeah.
Jim Romberg, and
One ceramist in
and
the
one
family.
ceramist in the family. And so, but it's interesting because his work is very abstract as well. And in fact, we have shown together in our history.
I can see it.
And yeah.
Do you think he
very
has
much-
influenced you in the way you paint at all? Or vice versa? How have you influenced in the way he paints or sees ceramics?
I don't think so, but I think we naturally have the same eye and the same interpretations. I don't know. I think I liked his work right away, and he liked mine. And so, as an artist, there are certain things that you have an affinity for certain texture. There's a lot of texture in his work and mine.
Very much so.
particularly his.
Yeah. And yours.
So I think we like texture. We like this sort of our color palette is similar. But we also spent. We've been together now for 12 years, and we almost every year, and sometimes twice a year, I was still doing a little bit of design business on the side and some of the things that I was involved with because of the show. Started going to Europe and started going to Paris. And he's a Francophile. He used to teach at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And so, of course, going to Paris means art. So we started spending a month at a time in Paris doing nothing but spending every day, all day in the museums, into the art museums, the Louvre and Montmartin and the galleries. And we would come back just re-inspired. And, you know, you can look at the classics and you don't paint like the classics, but you always learn something. And so these were really busman's holidays. We would go, and for a while there, we were going every year. I mean, that was our big deal. And we would spend a month at a time, and we would live like Parisians. And he's fully French speaking,
you know,
and I'm not.
That's when you really are an artist. You know, spending a month every year in Paris or in France, looking at art, talking about art, thinking about art. You're completely immersed. You're completely
and we
there.
are immersed.
Yeah.
Our lives are art. We talk about art all the time.
Yes.
Day in, day out. I mean, it's what we live.
Yes.
Our art.
It's a wonderful way to do it, isn't it?
I couldn't be happier. I mean, I just, you know, I always, everybody feels that there's certain moments in your life that are really down. And I mean, and listen, all this story doesn't come with a few serious hiccups during recession periods and other times where you blew it. You made the wrong decision. It took a long turn. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, where's my next dime coming from? I don't know how I'm going to keep it together. And I've got 2 kids, and what am I going to do? And da-da-da-da. And you know, everybody goes through that, I think, or some people don't. But
people that want to experience life to the fullest do, in my opinion.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
You got to take those risks. If you don't take the risk, you don't get to experience the joys and the heartache and all the stuff that comes with it. Because
that's what makes you who you are. Yeah. I mean, someone once told me, you know, you should be wearing a no fear sweatshirt all the time because that's really you. And I thought, are you kidding? Nobody's as much a scaredy cat as I am in the dark of the night.
Yeah.
You know, I may put on that face and pull myself up and go after things, you know, the next day, but don't think for a minute that I wasn't terrified the night before.
Well, I think you have to be.
And woke up at 4 a.m.
That's what pushes you. It's the fear to some extent pushes you to that next level of failure. I'm afraid I'm going to fail, so I'm going to work harder and harder and harder to try to get to that next level. I think that's a true thing. If you lose that, sometimes I think you've lost your edge.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh.
I haven't figured that out yet. Yeah. All right, now I'm just trying.
And so where are you headed now? Where do you see your artistic life going from here? Do you have any set goals or set ideas where you want to see yourself in another 5 years?
I think I just want to paint more. I will admit that I'll go through a spate of painting for maybe 6 months. And I know you get frustrated with this. And then I get bored. I'm tired of the palette. You know, it's just I'm an adrenaline junkie, I guess. I need that, and then adrenaline just finally kind of poops out.
Yeah.
And then I need a break, and I need to get away from it, and I'll start doing other things. That I'll work in the garden, I'll do other things. I'll paint the living room or just something else.
You're still creating or making.
Yeah, and it's always in the back of my mind, and I'm sort of collecting ideas and things like that. And I don't know where I'm going. Right now, I want to paint more. We just moved to the Northwest for a little bit. We still have a place here.
Yes.
And it has a different palette. It's a very different thing. We live couple blocks from the ocean. So, and I love water. I love the dynamics of water and rock.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that in my work. There's a lot of crashing water, could be snow melt. It's the dynamics. It's not passive pastoral.
Oh, no.
That's not me.
No.
I really love what happens. I mean, if you live in the Southwest, it doesn't take long before you're standing in Arroyo and you realize that the clouds are coming over and it's getting dark and you know it's raining on that mountain and you do not want to be in an Arroyo because of what happens. And when you really see what the next morning, a boulder the size of a truck has washed down what was a naked arroyo just because of the water that had come down, crashing down through that rock. these mountains are moving all the time. Whether it's a grain of sand, and I've said this in my artist statement, a lizard can move a grain of sand, which will eventually move that mountain.
Yeah.
And that to me is just absolutely fascinating. And so what you often see me paint is there's no sky, but what is that white or that off-white that's up above that rock? And then you realize that that's a snow melt or that's crashing water.
It's
and those
movement.
dynamics, it's movement. It's the fact that that mountain is moving all the time. Well, it looks like static to you, but it's not. And it's growing, or it's disintegrating, or it's whatever. And that's what I love about the Southwest desert. And that's what I try and bring to those paintings is that energy and that violence.
I see it for sure.
In some ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly in there.
And there are some, I've been criticized at times of my paintings being too violent.
No.
That there's too much action. Where's
thing.
the negative space? And I said, when there's water crashing down through an arroyo, there's no negative space. Yeah. It's all moving. And I love the idea that I can capture that. I don't paint trees with, pretty sunsets.
Yeah.
Sorry.
God. That's okay. I wouldn't represent you probably if you did.
So that's what I'm doing.
Oh.
More rocks, more water, more crashing.
More rocks.
We just
more
bought
water.
a boat. We just bought a 40-foot sailboat.
Yeah, that'll give you more inspiration as well.
Well, and I've been taking a lot of pictures about, with water crashing on rocks, on granite rocks at the ocean, at the shore. Yeah. And it's the same dynamics. Yes. I mean, they're just
but it is a different color palette for sure, because the light's so different. But it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, and I like the idea. Well, I'm kind of actually welcoming it, because after a time, the Southwest palette can get...
It's bright.
It's bright, and I like to just, a different mood, different day.
Yeah, different challenge.
Different challenge, another challenge.
I think that's how we should end it, Lynette. You always are looking for another challenge. Yeah. And it's been just so wonderful knowing you and getting to represent you. You're a professional. You're a hard worker. You always, as an artist, which I can assure you are 100% an artist. The only thing you're not an artist is you get everything on time. You need to be about a week behind on things, and then you would finally fill the last check mark.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, you definitely are an artist, and you're fantastic, and you can see all her art on our website. And
you've been so sweet. You've been so kind to me all these years, and such a great critic. You've been really good for me. There's a teaching part in me too. My parents were both teachers, and so I love it when I see somebody who has passion for what they do, and that's the kind of what I want this show to be about, is to meet those individuals and talk more to those people. What you say is very sharing for a lot of artists out there. They're going to hear this and they're going to go, okay, there's things I can really take away from it. Like, one, don't give up. Keep following. Don't give up.
You followed that. You followed that road a long time.
I did, and it doesn't mean that I haven't given up. There are times when Jim comes in and kicks my butt and says, "Get in there, get in that studio and paint. Stop this."
Yeah.
Because I'll go, I didn't like that painting. It was awful. And I had to tear it out and throw it in the trash. He's pulled a couple out of the trash, actually. And he's my savior, and I've done the same to him. I mean, because every artist goes through it. I don't care how accomplished you are.
That's right.
And I've learned that, because I thought, that just happens to me. It doesn't happen to everybody else. Not a real artist doesn't do that. And I've learned that that's not true. In fact, read the stories of the classics. Read the stories of the Impressionists.
Completely.
They were all depressed most of the time.
I had an artist who I will not mention his name, but that individual sent me an image of a piece that they did. This is an artist who's painted for 40 years in dozens of museums, and said, "What do you think? I'm not sure about this one."
It's true.
So they need, everybody needs to get away from it a little bit. It was a fantastic painting, by the way. And I was like, this is, send it my way, please.
I'll take that.
It's fine. But so I think the artists that are really want to get better and are looking to share what they do are always asking for that. They want to have that input. It's important, because sometimes you get too close and you don't know. And if
you get lost.
Yeah, and if you're smart enough, you ask for it.
Yeah.
to the people who
criticism's
will actually
important,
tell you.
really important. Like
Yeah.
never, if there's a message that goes out to other artists, never refuse the opportunity for a critic.
Yes, I agree.
Never.
Yes.
And
don't take it personal.
do not take it personally.
Yeah, because if it's if the person who's looking at it is a real critic who's trying to help you, they're going to give you feedback that hopefully will be helpful.
And you can decide whether you like it or not.
That's right. That's right.
You can do what they suggest or not.
Right.
It's your choice.
Yeah.
But listen.
Yeah.
Really helps.
Yeah. Lynette Jennings.
This has been great.
Thank you for coming down and spending the time to do this. I know you've got a busy schedule, and we'll see you on the internet. All right, Lynette Jennings.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Man Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublette. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, eBooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com.